It Chapter 2 is the next chapter in the adaptation of the famous Stephen King novel, It, and this film follows the Losers Club 27 years after the events of the first film. They have grown up, some have moved cities, and others have gone to have successful careers. But when Pennywise returns to Derry to terrorize the town once again, the Losers Club must reunite in order to defeat this evil once and for all. 2017's It was one of my favorite films of that year. It featured a terrific cast, an almost instantaneously iconic performance from Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, and some of the best scares that I've seen in a big-budget studio horror film in years. Now, Andy Muschietti has returned with some new and familiar faces to close out this story. But I would be lying to you if I said that I wasn't a bit nervous going into this movie, because this is a weird story. If you know how this book concludes, it's very strange, and it was chronicled in the 1990 miniseries of It. And I do think that that miniseries did tell the story of the Losers Club moderately well. I think the highest points in that miniseries are when it shows the Losers Club to be these kids who are just trying their best to survive against this demonic alien killer clown. However, I do feel that that miniseries quality, its level of quality, begins to rapidly deteriorate once it shows the Losers Club to be adults who are still trying to survive against Pennywise just 27 years later. And obviously, because I was such a big fan of the first film, I was hoping that this movie wouldn't follow in its path and it would tell the story just as well, if not better, than the first film. And although the level of quality that is put on display with this film is nowhere near as low as it is with the 1990 miniseries, I don't think that this movie quite lives up to its predecessor, and I did find this movie to actually be kind of disappointing. I think one of the best things about this movie, and it's something that you're probably going to hear a lot of praise about when other reviewers discuss this film, is in its cast, which is wonderful. Each of the members of the Losers Club are matched perfectly with the adult actors who portray them, even down to their freaking eyes. There are moments in this film when you can really see these kids in these adult performers. I thought they were perfectly casted, Bill Hader and Jessica Chastain being two highlights that I thought were particularly noteworthy. And of course, once again, Bill Skarsgård's performance as Pennywise in this movie is magnificent. I cannot think of a performance in a recent horror film that is as iconic as his performance is as Pennywise. Of course, not to say that there haven't been great performances in horror films recently, don't be ridiculous, but I don't think that there has been a performance that will be as iconic as something like Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger or Brad Dourif as Chucky. And with Andy Muschietti's aid, he is able to bring this character to life in a creepy and truly mesmerizing way. He steals every scene he is in once again. And speaking of Andy Muschietti, he once again returns to direct this film, thankfully. I thought his direction of the first movie was so unique. The way the scares are carried out in that film are so special, in addition to the heart that is at the core of that movie. It's truly amazing. Unfortunately, those are two elements that I do feel are missing from this movie, being the scares as well as the heart. As I mentioned, the way that the first film incorporates horror and scares into that movie, it's creepy, it's unsettling, it's fun, it's disturbing. I feel like the level of variety of scares that are put on display in that movie is so special, and even watching that film as many times as I have, there are still moments in that movie that still unsettle me. And unfortunately, I don't think that the same will be said about this film. Yes, of course, there are effective scares in this movie. But even though I just saw this movie a few hours ago, I think that there are only a handful of scares in this movie that actually will stick with me. Now, some might argue that that is because of diminishing returns. Pennywise isn't as effective as he is in the first movie because we've seen him before. I think that that's a good guess, but I don't think that's exactly what's happening with this movie. Because there are more than a few sequences in this film in which Pennywise just kind of transforms into this giant creature character and starts terrorizing members of the Losers Club. It happens a few times in this movie, and it is because of reasons like that this film doesn't have the same sense of ingenuity and creativity that was put on display with the first film, and as a result, it does feel a little stale. Additionally, I didn't feel as connected to these characters as I did with the first movie, and I do think I have a few reasons as to why. Oftentimes in this film, there are these flashbacks to sequences that we haven't seen prior to this movie. It shows the Losers Club as young children and offers a perspective of their lives that wasn't in the first film, but in doing this, I couldn't help but feel like I would rather be with this version of the Losers Club, despite the fact that this new cast of characters is tremendous, as I previously mentioned. I didn't feel the connection to these characters. I didn't feel the connection between them, which in a movie like this, with the themes that this film has, that's a bit of a problem. Furthermore, narratively speaking, I'm not sure why a large bulk of these sequences are in this movie to begin with, because more oftentimes than not, it just shows members of the Losers Club who are being terrorized by Pennywise once again, which I've seen that. It came out in 2017. It was one of my favorite movies of the year. And there are only a few instances of these flashbacks where I feel narratively they pay off. There's an instance with Richie's character that actually comes to mind as being a highlight. But more oftentimes than not, it feels like the filmmakers almost forgot that they were making a horror movie, so they went back and did some reshoots so they could add some more scares in this movie because they didn't feel as confident with just spending time with these characters, which is something that I don't fully agree with. If we spent more time with these new interpretations of the Losers together and actually saw them together throughout this entire film and not spread out like they are for a vast majority of this movie, I think the audience would have a deeper connection with these characters, and thus the ending of this movie would be much more meaningful than I thought it was. Even on a technical level, I don't think that these flashbacks work well. Yes, there is some de-aging of the actors in this film because they're of that age when 2 years actually makes them look like they've aged 30, and sometimes these de-aging effects are pretty noticeable in this movie. There's a scene in a clubhouse in this film that is particularly guilty of that fact. In addition to that, there's also some very clear ADR work done with some of the voice lines for these actors, and again, I would assume that's because 2 years makes quite a bit of difference, and I'm assuming that a lot of these actors' voices have gotten significantly deeper. So yes, narratively, these sequences feel out of place, and even on a technical level, I don't think that they work in this movie. And I would say overall, It Chapter 2 does display moments of effective scares and great performances, but it's because of its unfocused narrative and incredibly hit or miss attempts at horror. I just really don't see myself rewatching this film near as many times as I have its predecessor. So did you guys see It Chapter 2? What did you think about it? Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always guys, if you liked today's video, you can click on the link down below and subscribe to my channel to see more movie reviews and movie related things. I guess thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.